What's up, guys? It is Corey with Good Evening Tech with the second video of this series. So if you haven't seen the first video, feel free to go watch it. Short sum of it is we got WSL set up and showing our Apache Ubuntu default page. So if you've never worked with Apache before, I read through this, skim through it at least once because it gives you a basic idea of how Apache works. But remember, with our server, if you shut off your computer between now and then, run that sudo service apache 2 start and that sudo service mysql start. Run ifconfig, get that internal IP address, throw it into your favorite browser, and you'll be right here with me. So, something we're going to do real quick. This is a hacky way to get this done. So, not to get too deep in the weeds, but Linux has a lot of file permissions, and for this project, I just don't want to deal with them. I want to go around them, so we're going to change the file permissions so our text editor has a really easy time of getting everything. So when you first start everything, you see that you're in the mounted C drive, and we're going to navigate to a folder called var www.html. Looking at this, you can see right here, this is the folder that it points you exactly to. This is where all of your HTML will go to facilitate this. So if you've never used Linux before, or you're not familiar with the cd, the change directory command, you'll run it as just typing cd / var www.html. So that'll put you in the folder. The next thing we're going to run is called Chmod, Chmod. And I'm just going to write it out and talk about exactly what we're doing here. So what happened with this is sudo. If you've never seen sudo before and you've seen me type it a couple times and you're like, hey, what is this? Sudo is the super user. So Linux doesn't like people to run in a fully administrative way like like Windows. So it puts some privileges behind a super user wall. And certain users are in a sudo group, and they are given the sudo command that lets them act as the super user temporarily. Chmod, it's going to change the abilities for somebody to access this folder. 777, long story short with it, I would read the documentation about it because there's a lot of ways you can get into this, but it lets anybody or anything run read, write, and execute commands within this var www.html folder. That's a really big security risk, but when you're doing something inside a sandbox like this, there's not a big issue for that. But if you decide to make a project out of this that you want to put on the internet, make sure you look into Chmod, read documentation from Apache at what you should set these permissions to, so a malicious user doesn't get in there and just wreak havoc in that folder. So that's why we run this. It's a hacky way, just so my IDE has an easy way to run with this. Speaking of IDEs, it's an integrated development environment. What we'll be using for that is Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code, if you've never used it, it's one of the best things that Microsoft's released, and it's for free. It's available on Linux, Mac, pretty much any service you can think of, and it has support for all languages. It has a bunch of extensions you can install. If you want yours to look like mine, I have the GitHub theme working. If you're using Visual Studio Code on your Windows device, and when you go into the WSL, you notice that all your settings are gone. When you go into WSL, it creates its own settings folder, so you need to transfer all of them over, or just reinstall the stuff. That's what I do. But to get your WSL instance started, you first want to install this remote WSL from Microsoft. There will be an install button here. You'll just click that. It'll do what it needs to do. And then down here in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see an open remote menu. You're going to click that. I'm going to do new WSL window using distro. If you do the top one and you only have one WSL installed, it's going to use the default one. The default one's always the first one that you install. I'm going to go here for you guys, whatever distribution you installed. So I installed for this project 18.04. It'll open a new window. And what we're going to do from here is open folder. We're going to go var www.html and hit OK. All right, now as long as the permissions are set up correctly, the first thing that I like to do is grab somewhere in this, right above the body, type h1, do hello world. Ooh. Let's do Chmod. Maybe I need to go one folder up. Hit OK for that. Hit retry. I am going to undo that. What we can do here, it's probably going off of another instance of it being installed. That's the beauty of this. We get to troubleshoot together. Let's see if that worked. Open folder, var www html, go in there. I hit open file. So open folder, hit OK to that. Let's see if we can create a new file, test.html. Type hi. Then you can actually go here, type it with the file extension, and it works. Perfect. But we're going to get rid of both of these. So let me just double check here, make sure I can save this. So I don't look crazy when I say this. Hello world. Okay, so all I did to change this, remember this is kind of a hacky way to fix it, but I just changed the permissions to a folder to pretty much anybody can get into it. So if you do deploy this, fix that. That's all I'm going to say about it, but get rid of that window, get rid of that window, go here. So PHP. PHP is a language that lets the server generate data from any kind of loops, any kind of logic. It's not static like an HTML page. HTML is a structure to a web page, but it can't run logic within itself. So easiest way to tell if your PHP is working, this is the syntax. If you see the little gator right there, question mark, then PHP, then down here, the same thing. That's the start and the end to a PHP file. If all you have inside a file is PHP content, you can just get rid of that and leave it like that. You don't need to terminate it, but for this we will have other files in it. Echo is the command I'm going to run. We'll put some PHP into it. Type hello world, go right there, hit save. Perfect, it works. Add an exclamation mark, that's how we can see it's a new page. So, perfect. I'm going to open my project to the side here. So, the first thing I am going to do, if I can find the page, I have a lot of stuff open for some reason, is I'm going to set up a folder structure. So, PHP as a language is very messy. If you've ever seen that, if you've ever looked into it, you hear PHP is very, very messy. You can type PHP inside of any part of code. Let's see. This is HTML, and inside this HTML, I can echo out that, and in the paragraph tag. As you can see over here, it works. That hi is PHP inside of HTML. So as you go through a project, and you'll see I'm going to set up a lot of folder structure, this is not how I built the project. When I built this entire project, I more or less did it inside of this entire file and then started separating things as I saw they were getting too big or making things confusing. So when you're building something inside PHP, you can start to notice that things can get kind of out of hand and get kind of messy. So use folders, use other tools that PHP gives you. One that I didn't use in this project, but one you would probably look into if you're going to make a big project for somebody or yourself, is namespacing. Namespacing lets you containerize things, not just in files, but in a certain way that they can talk to each other. But that being said, I am going to create a folder. Make sure I set this up the same as the project. If you want to see the finished project and all the code and you don't want to wait for me to talk the entire time, this will be in a GitHub repo that you're more than welcome to download. I'm going to create a layout folder. Inside this layout folder, I'm going to create a header.php and a footer.php. So this is going to be the top part of our HTML document and then the bottom of our HTML document. I'm going to open it up on the side here. And I'm actually just going to grab it. And then we'll talk about exactly what it's doing. All right, so go over here. This is going to be PHP only, so I just need to type that. And then I'm going to paste this in here. Let's actually make the font a little bit bigger so you guys can see it better. Font size. What is it under? Update image size, blah, 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 blah. I think it's a user settings. There's a plus side and the bad side about Visual Studio Code. There it is. Oop, that might be too big. Let's go with 20. Let's see how 20 looks. Go in here. Perfect. Now what I was saying is, plus side about Visual Studio Code is it lets you customize everything, but sometimes it becomes a pain trying to find everything. But this function right here might look a little weird, but what it's doing inside of here is we're declaring a function. A function is a set of code that we can call on later. And we're creating this header. And it's called a doc string, but it's these 3 alligators, single quotes of what you're calling it. And then when you end it, you just type out that exact name and then put a semicolon. But what this is doing with echo is it's going to echo out this entire piece right here. So if you're curious why would you put a header inside of here, if your header starts going over several documents, let's say you have a multi-page application that has 50 of these pages, and you or the developer, somebody's asking you, hey, I need you to change something on this page. If you've written out this in every single document, then you have to go through and change it in every single place. This way, you have one place to change it. And later on, if you decide, hey, I want the title to change with every page, you can have the function accept a parameter and then change this dynamically. So it's just a nice thing to have there. But we'll hit save, and then we'll do the footer, and then I'll show you how to put them inside your document. So same thing with the footer. Tell it we're in PHP mode. Generate the footer. So in this project, I'm going to be using Bootstrap. I'm going to pull this up here. So in our header, we have this link ref. You don't need to type this out or figure out what it means. It even goes past the screen here. And in the footer, I have a script source for the Bootstrap bundle. All you need to do is go to Bootstrap, hit Get Started right here. Copy this into your header, and then copy this bundle into your footer. And that's where those come from. Now, before I save this, I want to create this JavaScript file. So we create it in source, and then app.js. And I'm going to run console.log connected. This just gives me peace of mind that it's actually working. Type module here, you're going to see later on, I'm going to also split up some of the JavaScript, and this is going to put it lets us use the import syntax. It lets the HTML interpreter, your web browser, know that, hey, there's going to be other JavaScript files that you may or may not have to request. But we'll hit save there. Then we'll go over into our PHP document, and we're going to pull these in and see if everything works. So I'm just going to delete everything. Let it know I'm going to be in PHP mode, then go down here and take out. We use require once. Go into our helpers folder, layout, do header.php. PHP is a language that you always need semicolons at the end of a line. It'll yell at you if you don't. Require once, helpers, layout, and then footer.php. Then what I'm going to do, if you call a function like this header that echoes out a header or this footer that echoes all of these out, wherever you call that function is where it's going to put it. So I'm going to create some space here because there's a little bit more stuff we're going to have to write up here. But I am going to call that function from the header. There we go. So generate header, put those in there. Then I know we're going to have a bunch of stuff in there. I'm going to go into PHP mode and then generate footer. If you're curious what this means as opposed to how this one is, if you just type out a function like this, it's not going to do what the function says. You're just kind of writing it out. That says, hey, execute this function right here. But let's go over. Ooh, I may have closed it. Nope, there it is. Should be a blank page, but we hit inspect. We have a header with all of that. And then we have the body. So that shows, hey, all of our stuff is working in that way. Perfect. Something I would recommend too is when you're developing in a mode like this, go to a guest account or use a private window. The reason for that is sometimes browsers catch what you're doing. Cache, there we go, C-A-C-H-E. What that means is it'll save certain parts of your project. Even if you change something, it saves it as a way to speed up. So in private mode, or you feel that you've changed something, but it's not changing something, just go in there into a private window and then refresh the page and see if it actually did change. All right. Something I need to check for us is I need to see if I installed sudo apt install PHP MySQL. Sorry, a spur of the moment thing here, but it's going to be important here real soon. So PHP is the language that talks with servers, but it doesn't download its entire package. So what we use the PHP MySQL package for is to let PHP have a package to actually interact with our server. So if you haven't installed that already, or you just remembered spur of the moment like me, or you had no idea, please make sure you install it. On top of that, we need to go in and restart our Apache server for it to use it. Server's restarted. Perfect. Now we are going to switch over and get our SQL database set up. So I'm going to go up here, make sure all my information looks the same from this. So we're going to do sudo mysql, log in as the super user, and we're going to do a couple things in here. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create the database. So what we will do is create database, and we are going to name this one for the project my PHP app, semicolon. You'll know it will work when it says query OK and 1 or 0 rows affected. So we can double check that it made it by running show databases, and we can see it right there. So my PHP app. Then we are going to create a user, and I'm going to name this one PHP app at localhost. You need to type it out exactly like this. You can't just name it PHP app. You have to do break out of the quotes, put an @ sign, and then localhost means it is a user that is using a localhost account. So something that logs in through this window is a localhost. And then we will type identified by, and I'm going to give it a password here. If it's something so somebody can't break in, don't put your own password here. Type that out. Query OK, so it made that user. Now what we are going to do is grant all privileges on my PHP app .star. So this .star means every single table inside of here this user will have access to. And then we do to PHP app at localhost. Should say OK, perfect. And we will do flush privileges. Flush privileges is not something that's necessarily required, but it forces MySQL to run everything that we just ran. So how we created a user, gave them a password, then gave them access to a certain database, this will force it to do that. All right, now what I want to do is create a table in there too, so we can actually start working with stuff. So we're going to do create table. We're going to name it appointments. Before I do that, I need to select the database. So use my PHP app. So we're inside of that database, and now we are going to create a table called appointments. Now inside of our appointments, we're going to have an ID of an integer, not null, auto increment. So what this means is this is going to be our primary key, which we'll tell it at the end. It's going to be an integer. It can't be null. An auto increment means that every time a record's added, MySQL will handle creating this for us. We'll hit username, varchar of 200, not null. Email of varchar 200, not null. So the not null, like I said with the ID, is, hey, you can't insert a record without these two in there. The varchar is the type of data, and we're saying 200 characters long of a varchar. So varchar is just, think of it like a string. And the first argument's the name. And we will give it appointment date of date time, not null. Then we will give it a primary key of ID. So that just comes full circle for us, and then we'll close it off. And as long as I inserted everything correctly, perfect. When making something in SQL or MySQL, SQL is different, it's owned by Microsoft, but MySQL is owned by Oracle. When you're creating all of these tables, everything is case sensitive, as in the names, the arguments, like not null, auto increment, you can do them uppercase or lowercase. But if you spell something wrong, MySQL doesn't have the best way to tell you. It'll just say, hey, something is wrong. So if you get an error that says something's wrong, the first thing I always do is check the spelling, check the punctuation, commas matter, brackets matter, semicolons matter. But now going into here, what we are going to do is create our way that we can look inside of this database. So what I want to do is get my information set up. So I'm going to create another folder in here. I'm going to call it database. Inside of database, I'm going to call it SQL init. And inside of this, enter PHP mode. I'm going to create a class. I'm going to call it my SQL login. And inside of here, create a public string of user name equal to PHP app. A public string of password. And what I would recommend, like I said with the folders, is storing information like this is a great way to keep it away from your index page. So if somebody got your index page, it's not stored in the same thing. But if you're going to store a password inside of a file like this, use tools that PHP has to create an environment variable that's stored elsewhere on the computer. We're going to do a public string of host name, name it localhost, and then a public string of database equal to my PHP app. And if this is a project you're going to share on GitHub or send off to somebody, you can make the GitHub ignore this file. So you just need to put instructions like, hey, you need to build this object for it to work. What we'll do over here is I am going to create, well, I need to get it in here first, require once, helpers, database, SQL init, there we go. And I'm going to create my SQL login info and have it equal to a new instance of that MySQL object. So now this variable is storing all of those values from that class in here. So you don't just have your password and your information in your database inside the main page of your website. but we are going to check this and see if it works now. So we're going to create a connection with a new MySQLi. Then we will run MySQL login, get the host name, then MySQL login username. And if you're curious where all this is coming from, if you hover over it, which it actually doesn't have autocomplete working right now. That's kind of weird. Maybe I don't have PHP. Like I was saying earlier, it removes everything from it. So I'm going to go through, install all those things for PHP. Put a semicolon here. Hit save on that. Close out of it. Then reopen it. There we go. So that was a package I just installed, and it gives us this autocomplete. So don't think I just know this by heart or by name. I'm using the source file over on the side to help me make this project. But when I set this up, I use this autocomplete to help us make what we need. So now we see we're on the password line. So MySQL info, set it to password. And then MySQL login database. So I named it all relatively the same as what those are. This is all that's required to start this database. If you look in here, there's a port and socket. Let's say the database lived on a different server or a different file. That's when you'd need, or sorry, just a different server. You would need those connections there. All right. Now we're going to run something to let us know if there is an error. So we'll go in here. Type error in the database, and then string concatenation in here in PHP is the dot syntax. So if you want to put two strings together, you put the dot. Oop, I don't want that there yet. I want to put it in what's called a die. So what die does is it stops everything PHP is doing. So oop, I had one dot more than I should have. So if die runs, it says equivalent to exit. If there's a connection error, the program will stop right here. It won't generate the header, it won't generate the footer. It'll put exactly what text we put in there. Let's go in here, moment of truth. HTTP 500. All right, let's make sure. Hostname, username, password, database. Perfect. Let's go into here. On sudo service apache 2 restart. Restart the server, and then sudo service mysql restart. Go back into here. The joy of PHP and why it's not working. Connection error. So what this means, and I've learned through trial and error, if it's getting to here, it's not even getting to this part. So there's something either wrong with this or something wrong with this new connection that we just made. So let's go through here, make sure host name, username, password, and then database. Make sure I'm not missing anything on the actual file that I created. Go up here. I don't need that. Make sure I spelled this right. Control C. Put that in there. Go back over here. Nope. PHP app. Let's go back into sudo mysql. Show database. Oh, I know what we can do. We can go here and do mysql user PHP app. Do the password line. And then we will type out this password we made. Ooh, maybe the password's wrong. PHP app. Well, that seems to be the problem right there. Sudo MySQL. Go in here and look up how to change a password because I don't know. Go into change password MySQL. Type on the documents themselves. Then we'll do alter user PHP app at localhost identified by all right, let's see if that fixed that. Perfect. There we go. Helps when you spell stuff right? All right, so even when you made an app more than once, this is the third time I've made this, you'll see that problems can still happen, and spelling for me is always the biggest issue. I like to type faster than I can think, or think faster than I type. I don't know. But all right, so we got that connection set up. Let's see what we're going to do next. All right, we got Bootstrap in there. Perfect. Let's make sure that our connected works, so our JavaScript is connecting over. So the program is set up, and that will complete it for this video. If you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. We're going to hit part 3, the final part of setting everything up. And yeah, I'll see you real soon.